Hey, thank you very much for coming by, Brian for Liberty today. I certainly appreciate your time. I hope you enjoyed the video. Stick around to the end. If you like the content, please hit that like button. And if you haven't subscribed to me yet, please subscribe. I'm only 6 subscribers away from 100. You could be the subscriber who gets me there. So just trying to grow the channel, get the word out, and spread some economic ideas and some libertarian thoughts on the internet. I don't think that there's a big enough presence of libertarianism, of third-party thought in general. So if you can help me grow my channel and help get that message out there, maybe we can help further the conversation in this country when it comes to politics and solutions and all those different things. We have to break through this left-right duopoly and have more voices represented, and that's just what I'm trying to do here. So hit the subscribe button, like the content if you think it's good, and again, share it. So today I am going to be once again addressing systemic racism. If you haven't seen my video, Systemic Racism, A Legacy in America, go back and watch it, because I talk very thoroughly, I think, of how we ended up here and how the black community and the outcomes that they're seeing are so drastically different than the white community, and the legacy of issues and decisions that we made after we passed the Civil Rights Act are still affecting the black community today. So I do address some of those things. And today I'm going to be talking specifically about whether or not the system is actually inherently racist, because that is the fight that we are having right now. And it's very important to answer that question properly, because if we don't, then we're going to be treating the wrong disease, right? If the system is broken and it's creating poor outcomes, then it needs to be fixed. But if we say it's broken because it's racist, then that's a different set of fixes than if it's not racist. So let's take some of the statistics that you hear regarding systemic racism. First is home mortgages. You hear that a lot because they say white people get approved at a higher rate, even with similar credit scores, et cetera, et cetera. The problem with home mortgages is that it's an incomplete statistic, because there's so many different things that go into the decision-making process of home loans that, again, there's a lot of legacy issues we're dealing with that are going to create poorer outcomes for black people. That doesn't mean the system is currently inherently racist, but some of those factors are job history, loan to value history, job longevity, all these different factors that go into making these decisions. The African-American community, the black community in this country, may have more trouble qualifying for a loan en masse, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the system is inherently racist today. Same thing when it comes to longer sentences for black people who are arrested than white people for the same crime, when both have clean criminal histories. There's a lot of things that go into that. All this, when you look at 17-year-old kid, two 17-year-old kids in high school, one's white, one's black, one's a straight A student, one's on the honor roll, one is, ABC, doing all these different things, associates with other, is in sports and activities and all these different things. And another one is not a good student, maybe has dropped out of high school, maybe. So it's not just about criminal background. And the idea that there are no racist judges, of course, there are racist judges. I get that. But is the system itself inherently racist? The only factor that could be considered, if you're going to use these statistics to prove systemic racism, you'd have to dig so deep into each individual case and go judge by judge and break down all these different sentences for the amount of information you'd have to gather to prove that it's systemic racism is vastly deeper than whether or not the sentence was unequal or whether or not this person got a home loan, because there's just too many X factors, and you'd have to take everything out except for the fact that they have two different races, and you'd have to eliminate every other possible variable. So when I started looking at kind of like crime data, and when you think about how the police interact with the public, and you say one of the biggest issues of systemic racism in this country is the fact that there's a solid belief right now that police are slaughtering black people in the streets, that there's fundamentally killing way more disproportionately high number of African Americans as opposed to white Americans, and that this is a constant issue. So when we dig up a little information and we say, how do we break this down so that we could try and get to a point where race is actually the only factor? So I looked at violent crime. And I said, well, let's break down violent crime statistics and compare that with the number of deaths at the hands of the police and see what the proportionality of that is. So when I looked at the number of, the only year I could get complete information on this was 2018. So I took 2018's violent crime stats and I said, okay, here's how many violent crimes were reported amongst whites, and here's how many violent crimes were reported amongst blacks. And I compared the proportionality of that. And African Americans, blacks committed about 64% of the violent crimes that white people did. So just to kind of make that make sense, if you have white people committing 100 violent crimes, that means black people committed 64. Okay, so I took that and I said, okay, well, how many people were killed by police amongst these two races? And if you were, so of that number, blacks were killed 52% as often. So what that means is for every 100 white people who were killed by a police officer, 52 blacks would be killed by a police officer. So from a proportionality standpoint, you're actually, in terms of the relation of violent crime to deaths at the hands of the police, you're actually 10% less likely to be killed if you're a black person. So to me, that kind of sets aside the idea that police are inherently racist and running and gunning for black people. And the reason I used violent crime is because it's not a statistical anomaly based on over-policing, right? So you look at over-policing and you go, yeah, you can't say that more black people are dealing drugs. It's just the police are there catching them because these neighborhoods, these areas have a much higher police presence than white areas do. So you can't make that argument, the misdemeanor argument, the petty crime argument, all these different things. You really can't make that argument because there's clearly a higher police presence in black communities than there is in white communities. But violent crime you can't say there's more murder and rape and manslaughter and assault because the police are there. That's not accurate. So that's why I took just violent crimes, just the proportionality. It's an incomplete statistic, just like every other statistic is incomplete. But from a proportionality perspective, I say, well, it's really hard to say that the police are specifically targeting and killing black people when you look at the percentages and the proportionality there. The interesting thing about all of this argument is, what is the solution to the problem? What is the answer to the problem? And this is where I think this is why determining whether or not the system is racist or not is incredibly important, because I'm looking at the cures. I'm looking at the things that we're saying we're going to do to solve this problem, and we're treating it's the wrong thing. It's the wrong answer. We are looking at the police departments and we're saying these police departments are too big. They're too powerful. We need to defund them. They need to stop policing as much as they are. And that's going to solve the problem. That's not right. That's not the right answer to the issue that we're having. The answer to the issue that we're having is we have to fix the issue from the top down, not the bottom up. If you look at the police department, that's trying to solve the problem from the bottom up. And you look back at the murder rates in the 1980s compared to today, it's almost twice as high back then as it is now. So over-policing in terms of eliminating violent crime, reducing violent crime, has worked. If you pull those police back, and you leave all the other structures and all the other laws in place, then you're going to have a return to that level of violent crime. That's what we're missing. That's kind of what we're not seeing here. And so you have to look at the structure itself. And if you want to treat this as a race issue, then you're going to come up with the wrong answers. The real answer and the right answer is that government has just grown to be too powerful. And there are too many laws in place that create excuses and reasons for police to interact with the public. And because of that, we have all these other issues. Not only that, but I also talk about the perverse incentives of drug dealing. I talk about that in my other systemic racism video, the perverse incentive created by the criminalization of drugs and how that's having an incredibly powerful impact on the black community, particularly at the end of the civil rights movement. Again, go back and watch that video and I kind of explain that out. So as we look at the cure of pulling the police out, we're not solving the legal problems. We still have all these laws. We're still perversely incentivizing drug dealing. We are still giving police hundreds and hundreds of reasons to pull people over on a daily basis because we want to control human behavior. But if we don't change the drug laws, if we don't move towards decriminalization and start solving some of these other issues, you're going to see a return of violent crime at levels that we had in the 80s. We're not fixing the problem. And I'm telling you that 10 to 15 years from now, we're going to look back, we're going to forget the lessons we're learning, and all of a sudden, we're going to say we need more police. And we're going to be in this cycle, right, where okay, we're going to have an increase in violent crime, so we're going to demand more policing. We're going to put police on the streets. Violent crime is going to come down. We're going to forget about that. Now we're going to say, oh, there's this disproportionate enforcement amongst the black community, blah, 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 blah. We need to pull the police back. The system's racist, so on and so on and so on. We have to start looking at our legal structure and the laws in place and to what extent we want to control human behavior and start tearing that system apart. We need to decriminalize drugs. We need to decriminalize drugs just to bring and this is going to sound super counterintuitive, but we need to bring the price of drugs down so that there's no perverse incentive for people to sell them on the black market. We need to destroy the black market. We need to eliminate the incentive to have territorial gang wars and all of these things by making drugs just not as profitable to sell in the black market. That's what we need to do. We need to reduce that crime, and we need to reduce that perverse incentive, and then we can reduce the number of police, because then crime will naturally start falling. That's how you solve this problem, not by taking and eliminating the police department first, because then you're going to have an uptick in violent crime and you're going to react to that. We need to stop being reactionary and start being proactive. We have to look at the laws on the books, and we have to start understanding that we need to be comfortable with allowing people to make their own decisions and their own choices and live with those consequences, as opposed to living with the consequences of a government that is too powerful and controlling too many different aspects of our lives. That's how we ended up here. So when you look at the left and you look at Black Lives Matter and you look at two founders who have admitted to themselves that they are trained Marxists, and you look at the far left ideology of socialism, and I'm not talking about your standard moderate run-of-the-mill Democrats. I'm talking about this movement that's taking place in this country right now for socialism, for Marxism, for centrally controlled, to essentially put more power in the hands of government. If you believe that the system is inherently racist, why would you want to make the system more powerful? We need to start tearing that system down. We need to give people more freedom, more liberty, so they're not in a position where their government has enough power to even attempt to oppress them. So that's the real answer, is to move closer to liberty. Whether you believe the system's racist or not, really the answer is to move towards liberty, because we want police. The idea that it's okay that police are killing black people because they're also killing white people is ridiculous. That's not the argument I'm making. The argument is we need to put ourselves in a position where police don't have an excuse to interact with us unless we are in the commission of a crime with a clearly identifiable victim. So that's why we're approaching this wrong. That's why we have to keep having this talk about systemic racism. And quite frankly, I think we need to fight back against that message so that we're actually addressing the real issues in our society and not chasing a phantom. So I just wanted to get that one out. I know I've been talking, if you're a subscriber and you're watching my videos, I know I've been talking about getting to chapter 4 of Thomas Sowell's amazing book, Basic Economics. I've read the chapter twice. I've taken tons of notes. There's just so much information there that it's taken me a little bit more time to put the video together than I thought. I'm hoping I'll have it out on Tuesday. I promise you I will be way more consistent in a couple of weeks. We are in the process of a move here, so we're packing. We're trying to get our house sold, the next house bought, and there's all this stuff going on. So it's been difficult for me to find time to put all these things together. But I promise you in a couple of weeks, you're going to see a lot more consistency out of here, and you're going to be able to count on this is when these episodes are going to hit. So please subscribe, turn on those notifications, share the content if you think it is good. And I appreciate you stopping by. And as always, I will see you next time.